Chapter 6. Ordinary Seamen. Requisites: hand, reef, and steer. Loose, furl, and set sails. Reeve rigging. Work upon rigging. Watch duty. An ordinary seaman is one who, from not being of sufficient age and strength, or from want of sufficient experience, is not quite competent to perform all the duties of an able seaman, and accordingly receives a little less than full wages, and does not contract for the complete qualities of an able seaman. There is a large proportion of ordinary seamen in the Navy. This is probably because the power of the officers is so great upon their long cruises to detect and punish any deficiency, and because, if a man can by any means be made to appear wanting in capacity for the duty he has shipped to perform, it will justify a great deal of hard usage. Men, therefore, prefer rather to underrate than to run any risk of overrating themselves. An ordinary seaman is expected to hand, reef, and steer, under common circumstances, which includes boxing the compass, to be well acquainted with all the running and standing rigging of a ship, to be able to reeve all the studding sail gear, and set a topgallant or royal studding sail out of the top, to loose and furl a royal, and a small topgallant sail or flying jib, and perhaps also to send down or cross a royal yard. An ordinary seaman need not be a complete helmsman, and if an able seaman should be put in his place at the wheel in very bad weather, or when the ship steered with difficulty, it would be no imputation upon him, provided he could steer his trick creditably under ordinary circumstances. In reefing or furling the courses and topsails, an ordinary seaman would not take the bunt or an earing, if there were able seamen on the yard, and perhaps, in the largest-sized vessels, it would not be expected of him to pass it, or make up the bunt of a fore or main topsail or course in bad weather. Yet he should know how to do both, and should be able to take a bunt or earing on the mizzen topsail yard, and on any topsail or lower yard of a small vessel. It is commonly understood that an ordinary seaman need not be a workman upon rigging. Yet there are probably few men capable of performing the duties of an ordinary seaman, as above detailed, who would not be somewhat acquainted with work upon rigging, and who could not do the simpler parts of it, such as serving and splicing small ropes, passing a common seizing, or the like. And it is always expected that an ordinary seaman shall be able to make all the hitches, bends, and knots in common use, such as 2 half hitches, a rolling hitch, timber hitch, clove hitch, common bend, and bowline knot. He would also be thought deficient if he could not draw, knot, and ball up yarns, and make spun yarn foxes and common sennet. Yet it is said that if he can steer his trick, and do his duty creditably in working ship and taking in and making sail, he is entitled to the rate and wages of an ordinary seaman, though he cannot handle a marlinspike or serving boat. The duty upon which an ordinary seaman is put depends a good deal upon whether there are boys or green hands on board or not. If there are, he has a preference over them, as an able seaman has over him, in the light work, and since he stands his helm regularly and is occasionally set to work upon rigging with the men, he will be favoured accordingly in the watch and in common duty about decks. Yet the distinction between ordinary seamen and boys is not very carefully observed in the merchant service, and an ordinary seaman is frequently called upon for boys' duty, though there are boys on board and at hand. If an officer wished for someone to loose a royal, take a broom and sweep the decks, hold the log reel, coil up a rope, or the like, he would probably first call upon a boy, if at hand. If not, upon an ordinary seaman, but upon either of them indifferently, before an able seaman. If there are no boys on board, the ordinary seamen do boys' duty, the only difference being that if they take their trick at the wheel and do other ordinary seamen's work, the able seamen are not so much preferred over them as over mere boys and green hands.